It's good to be here tonight. It's good to be standing here tonight. Kind of ironic, the message that God had given me, and I've been thinking about it often in just the last couple of weeks, and man, the title, Stephanie will put that up there. Look at that. Boy, that's a pretty good graphic there. Know your enemy. It's kind of ironic that it, I have this message. When I go to work, I get an hour by myself and kind of get to collect my thoughts before I get to work, and I have to deal with a bunch of young guys that I really have a hard time dealing with. I've been in class with them for a couple of months and got in trouble for calling them idiots and all that stuff. That's spiritual warfare, all right? But that's just part of it, right? I guess the older I get a little more of my dad's patience, which is not much. But he gave me a lot of good traits, though. My good looks and... But I was going to work the other morning, and I like to listen to Jay Vernon McGee. He's the first one that I listen to about 6 o'clock, and I get to hear him go through the Bible. Actually, it comes on earlier than that. But anyway, he goes through the Bible, and it just breaks down the scriptures, and I love to hear him talk. And then the next person that comes on is John MacArthur. Some people like him, some people don't. I particularly like the guy. I love to hear him speak, but I didn't get to hear much of his message. The only thing I got to hear was just the introduction, and it was talking about knowing your enemy. And that was about all I heard. I heard him say, in this world you have three enemies. It's Satan, the world, and the flesh. That's the only three things I got to hear. I went to the fire station, I wrote it down, and I just began to think of that. I had a talk with Seamus out there, and Seamus, he's got some spiritual warfare going on, okay? I don't think he cares if I tell him that. Pray for Brother Seamus. Pray for me. It seems like everywhere I go, I get spiritual warfare. I think if we're Christians today, and if you're not experiencing spiritual warfare, you probably ought to back up and examine your life and see where you're at. But in our Sunday morning class, we're talking about spiritual warfare, and we talk about the spiritual armor, and we always like to hit on the armor, and it's important to be prepared and have the right stuff on to fight, It's important to have the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, the shield of faith, your feet shod with preparation of the gospel of peace, all that stuff. It's important to be clothed. I mean, you wouldn't want to go play a football game in a basketball outfit, right? You need to know, you got to have the proper stuff on. But I think as we kind of had, a church meeting, as we kind of talk about some things in our church, I think that we need to realize who our enemy is. That's what we need to. We need to go in, when it talks about in Ephesians 6, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers in the darkness of this world. We need to understand that our enemy is much more than sometimes we can even put our heads and our minds around. It really is. And we go through this world a lot of times, and we've got all this stuff to fight with, and we've got all this armor on, but a lot of times we don't realize who we're fighting against. Right. Our pastor is not our enemy, all right? He just isn't, okay? Now, change sometimes might be the enemy, right? New ideas sometimes might be in our minds the enemy. But our pastor is not our enemy, all right? He don't look tough enough to be my enemy, all right? He just doesn't. He's short and stocky, though. I'll give him that. But what I'm saying is we need to understand who we're fighting with today. We need to understand who is our enemy. And a quote I've used here many times in the book of The Art of War, Sun Tzu said this: if you know your enemy and know yourself, You need not worry the outcome of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will suffer a defeat. And if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. All right? So what we have to do is we have to know ourselves. We have to know what we're capable of. We need to know what trips us up. We need to know the sins that we need to stay away from. We need to know those things. We need to know ourselves, and we need to know our enemy. That's what we have to understand. And our enemy is something greater sometimes than I think that we can even imagine. But number one, Satan is our enemy, period. He's not this doll with a ponytail and a pitchfork, and, sometimes I make him out to be cute, if you see a little Satan doll, anyway, I'm just saying, we need to know that he's vicious. The Bible talks about how vicious he is. The Bible talks about, and we need to understand that he is our enemy. We have to know how myself, when I am confronted with that spiritual warfare, I need to know how the things I need to stay away from. Because in the second part of that quote, it says, if you know yourself and the enemy, for every victory gained, you will suffer a defeat. And unfortunately, we're living in a day and age where Christians are happy with winning half the battles. Yeah. Really. 50-50 Christians, I guess you could call them. And anywhere that you go, if it's in a school setting, 50%, that's a failing grade, just so you know. Unless you're doing some Common Core, you're grading on a curve or however they want to do it, just so everybody will pass. But, if it's 50-50, you've got an F. So I'm here to tell you today, if you're getting your butt kicked half the time, you better back up and do something different. Because you need to realize who your enemy is, because we're not Christians who need to go around and be defeated half of the time. I'm not saying that we're not going to have trials or tribulations or anything in our life, but I'm telling you, if you're happy with 50-50, then, man, I don't know why you'd be happy with that. Amen. You need to understand, we got pastors from the pulpit preaching half the story. They want to preach about heaven and not hell. That's only half of the story. We have preachers that, want to, I could do my Joel Osteen imitation, but I won't, speaking just about heaven and not hell. Listen, it's real. There is another side to the story. There is good and there's evil. There is righteousness, there is sin. There is heaven and there is hell. And I think I would be doing a disservice if I didn't talk about that or preach that. So as we go through into this message, we have to understand, number one, Satan is our enemy. And if you look at Ezekiel chapter 28, and I don't think I gave that verse to you, but that's okay. But Ezekiel chapter 28, and this just kind of describes Satan and where he came from. Ezekiel, if you want to turn there, if not, I'll read it real quick. Ezekiel chapter 28, 15 through 17. I know I look good with glasses on. You can tell me that when we're done. But it says here in verse 15, thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created, till iniquity was found in thee. By the multitude of thy merchandise I have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. Therefore I cast thee as a profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy thee, O covering cherubim, for the midst of the stones of fire. We can go to Isaiah 14, 12 through 14. Maybe I gave that to you. Oh, there it is. I'm going to try to do my best to start looking at the screen. But how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down in the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, I will set also upon the mount of the congregation in the side of the north. Is that it? Nope. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, and I will be like the Most High. Here, these two, you shall be brought down to hell, to the side of the pit. Okay? This is explaining how Satan became Satan. All right? And so as we start thinking about Satan, he was created to praise God. That was his whole purpose, okay? To make music to God. He was created because iniquity and sin entered in him, because pride came into his heart. That's how Satan became Satan. And I have a book, it's a Spiritual Warfare Answer book, and it says this. This is Dr. David Jeremiah. To this day, Satan remains arrogant, prideful, and rebellious against God. It is a warning to us as Christians that since Satan's personality is characterized by pride, he will tempt us by using the same weakness in ourselves. And as we start thinking about that pride, that's how Satan became Satan. And if you don't think for a minute that Satan will use pride in our lives to try to get us to get bent out of shape, get mad about something, this is the way I want to do it. And because you all don't want to do it, that way it's wrong, right? Pride. Because of pride, Satan decided that he was better or on the same as God, and that he should be exalted as God, and he got cast out of heaven for that. Listen, pride is something in our churches, in our lives, in my life, that has hindered me a great deal in my life. And we need to understand who Satan is. We need to understand how he got to where he is. We can go to Ephesians chapter 6, and I'm going to go there real quick because I want to read some commentary, what my Bible says, and I kind of hit along this, but listen, this talks about the armor of God. This talks about everything that we need to be clothed with to fight a battle, right? It talks about who we're fighting with, and it's Satan. He is our enemy. But sometimes I don't know that we realize the battle that we're really in. And as I read this and studied this, I came across my commentary, and I'm just going to read two of the things that he said here for chapter 6 and verse 10. It says this. It says, finally may be rendered from here on or henceforth. Do you realize from here on out, we as Christians are going to battle Satan and his army? Do you realize that from here on out, when it says finally, this is what Paul's saying, is if you don't hear anything I have to say after this, finally, listen to this. We are going to fight a spiritual battle from here on out in our lives. We have to understand that no matter what happens, if you are a Christian today, you will face battles with Satan. You have to realize that from here on out. The spiritual battle Christians are engaged in exists from now on until the Lord's return. You can't drop your sword. You can't turn and run. You can't face a battle head on one day and face the same battle the next day and run again. Amen. You can't do it, because I can tell you what's going to happen. You're going to get your butt kicked 50% of the time. If you like that, then continue to do what you're doing. My kids love my saying, what is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Guarantee every one of them can quote that today. But the spiritual battle exists from now on until the Lord's return. There is no quarter given, no ceasefire, no temporary truce, no cessation of hostilities. From now on till the end, there is an all-out war. The remainder of this verse is paragraphized as, let yourself constantly be strengthened by the Lord by his might. And then when it talks about 11, he says this. Put on denotes a sense of urgency. Do you know how urgent it is that Christians today, when they put on the armor of God, some Christians won't even do that. Some Christians won't even take the time to pray and read their Bible. And I'm talking about myself. Okay, I fell in that same category. I went out of my house as spiritual naked as I could be. And I don't get that picture in your mind, all right? But I'm just saying, I went out of my house where I am not prepared to fight Satan as I should be, because I'm not prepared. I didn't put on that armor. I didn't realize how ruthless he was. I didn't realize how mean he was. It denotes a sense of urgency. There is urgency in our lives today. If we want to talk about our church and the things that are going on in our church, there's urgency in our pastor's voice. He's not our enemy. I'm not his enemy. You're not my enemy. But there's urgency in what we're doing, because as we continue, it's going to get worse and worse if we don't understand that Satan is the driving force in our lives and in our church. And I'm talking about myself. I can complain till the day is long, but when it comes down to it, if I live this Christian life and continue to live this Christian life, I'm going to suffer battles, and I better be ready. There's a sense of urgency demanding immediate action. To stand has military overtones. This is used in classical Greek, meaning to resist the enemy and hold a critical position in battle. We need to hold what we got. That's what it's saying. And as we think about this, and we think about Satan, all we got to do is go into Genesis chapter 3. And if you don't think Satan is real, this is where it all started. You can read about Satan in Genesis, and then you can read about him in Revelations. He was there in the beginning, and he was there in the end. You can read about him a lot through the Bible. You can see the influences that he had on people. You can see the things that he was allowed to do. And what baffles me in Genesis when we talk about Satan being there, man, he was there. This was a perfect place that God created, and he was in amongst the two perfect people in the world, Adam and Eve at the time. He was there. He was able to come up to Eve and said, why aren't you eating this fruit? He was able to talk to her. He was her enemy, and she did not realize this. But he was amongst them. He was in this perfect garden. And so what is that telling us Christians today? He's going to be amongst us. We can pray, and we can rebuke him and all that stuff, but I'm telling you, if we are not prepared for battle, and if we don't understand that he is amongst us in this world, then we have another thing coming. We need to understand in Genesis he was there. Let's go to John chapter 10, verse 10, and this is going to kind of start describing Satan here. The thief cometh not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. The thief. There's many things that Satan is known for in the Bible, and I've got some of these wrote down, and if you want to scratch them down later, I can give you this. But one of them is a thief. In Revelations 12:9, it just calls him the old serpent. Revelations 9:11, the destroyer. Listen to these words that are describing Satan, who some people don't realize how vicious he is. Revelations, or John 12:15, the evil one. Listen, evil. Understand what it's saying there. John 8:49, he is a liar and a murderer. I mean, those two words there is two words I don't want any part of. Ephesians 2:2, the prince of the power of air. John 12:31, the prince of this world. John 14:30, prince of this world. Revelations 26:2, he is the old serpent. And Matthew 4:3, he is the tempter. But if we look at this, the thief, I mean, I don't know how about you, but I do everything that I can to protect things that I own. And one of them is to keep people from coming into my home and stealing from me. I don't want the thief to come in to steal and to kill and destroy. But when that thief comes in, that's usually what happens. He steals from you. He's going to steal your time. He's going to steal your thoughts. He's going to steal your joy, your happiness. As he begins to steal all of that, sometimes he steals your sanity. Sometimes he's stealing your sanity. He'll even steal your health. Listen, this is things that happen because your mind is very powerful. He is there to kill and to destroy. And if you think about something that is destroyed, I think of I went on a call many years ago in Springfield, and a bomb went off in this house. And when we got there, we'd been there before, this house looked nothing like it did before. Nothing. You couldn't tell where the front door was at. You couldn't tell where, it was just everywhere. And so that verse right there is telling me he wants to come in and he wants to make my life so unrecognizable when he's done that I never know which way I'm going or which way I'm coming. And that's what he wants to do for us. He wants to get us in so much turmoil. He wants to steal from us and kill and destroy us to the point that we are beyond recognition. And if we don't understand that today, if we don't understand that is what his purpose is, you might be one of those 50-50 Christians. But listen, there is joy. I am come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. This is Jesus talking. If we'll just trust Jesus today, then we will have victory. The next verse I have is 1 Peter 5:8, another verse that I read a lot when it talks about Satan. And here it is: be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walking about, seeking whom he may devour. Be sober, be vigilant. Means take your position. Don't let anything influence you other than the Word of God. Be sober. Be in your right mind. Because your adversary doesn't say your pastor or your deacons, anything like that. Your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour. I don't know if you've ever seen a hungry dog eat something when they're really hungry. A couple of bites and it's gone. I don't know if you've ever seen, I seen a video a few years ago where a lion attacked a man. It was pretty vicious, okay? And it was over like that. Do you really want to go in and fight a lion without Christ on your side? But listen, that's what he wants for you. He wants to destroy you. He wants to devour you, is what he wants. He wants your life so unrecognizable that you are of no good to anybody around you. And if you're not careful, that's what he'll do. If we look at Satan and we think about his characteristics, I talked a little bit about pride. And if we look at Matthew chapter 3, or verse 4, chapter 4, verse 3, and it's when Christ was fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. And Satan came and he tempted him, right? What's the first thing he tempted him with after he'd fasted for 40 days and 40 nights? Food. You know what that tells me? I'm not real smart. I'm originally from Cabral, now I'm from Norwood. I'm a little smarter, I guess, as my wife says. But listen, he knows what you struggle with. If he was so prideful and arrogant that he was willing to tempt Christ after he was in the wilderness for 40 days praying and fasting to his heavenly Father, if he was willing to tempt him and he really thought it was going to work, do you not think that he's going to come after you? Do you not think that, he's going to come after this church? I mean, he wants to come into this church, or in any church. I'm not just saying this church, but he wants to come in any church, and he wants to absolutely make a church so destroyed and so unrecognizable to the world that the world will say, well, there's another one right there. That's what he wants to do. I mean, we could sit back, and if you like getting an F on papers, I like, just skating by with a 71. That's my deal. But if you're one of them ones that like getting an F on your, continue what you're doing, okay? Maybe go continue it somewhere else. But what I'm saying is this: we have to understand that Satan will tempt us with the very thing that we've struggled with our whole lives. Whatever that is. You can put your sin in that category And there's things that you need to stay away from in your life. If you have a problem with drugs or alcohol, there's certain things you need to stay away from. If you have a problem with looking at something on a computer that you're not supposed to, then maybe you need to stay away from computer. And I can go on and on and on. If I have a problem with young kids that try to tell me and boss me around, maybe I just need to stay away from them, right? That's not possible with my job because it's filled with young people. But what I'm saying is this. We need to understand Satan wants nothing good for us as a person. He is the one driving this sin train. He is the one that is focused on killing and destroying you as a person. Men, if he can get into your homes and he can destroy you as a person, if he can get you sidetracked in your homes with things in your mind and thoughts that is going on in your home, he will destroy your home. If he can destroy your home, he'll destroy a part of the church. If he can destroy a part of the church, it ain't long, and maybe the whole church will be destroyed. The second thing I want to talk about is Satan is your enemy, and definitely this world is your enemy. And if you think about this world and the things that are in this world, man, there's just not many things that are good for a Christian person. First verse I have is John chapter 16, verse 33. And you know what? Again, I wish I could tell you that when you become a Christian, that everything's going to be perfect. And when you get up from an altar or from your bed, wherever you accept Christ in your life, that things are going to be perfect. I would love to tell you, I'd love to tell you that the prosperity gospel is 100% true. That once you become saved, that everything is just going to be butterfly wings and fairy kisses and all that stuff, but it's not. Okay? And this verse right here proves that. I knew Webb was fixing me up. Thank you. These things have I spoken unto you, that in me you might have peace. In the world you shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. This is again Christ talking, and here he's saying, these things have I spoken to you, that in me you might have peace. Now this is not saying you may have, it's saying you might, and when it's saying you might, it means you're going to have peace. If we understand that we must, as Christians, put on that spiritual armor of God, if we understand that we're fighting against Satan, if we understand that the world is no good for us Christians, we have to live on the hope that in Jesus Christ we will have peace. This is one thing that I struggle with because I like to worry a lot. My wife worries a lot. But listen, in Jesus, you will have peace. It doesn't say money or anything else. If you can't sit down somewhere alone and kind of get alone and kind of, I call it collecting my thoughts. Today I went down by the river and checked traps and just kind of sat there for a minute and just kind of collected my thoughts and thought about a little bit. If you can't get alone somewhere and collect your thoughts and have peace when you take a deep breath, you better start examining your life. And I'm not saying that sometime you're not going to have turmoil and spiritual warfare. That's not what I'm saying. But there has to be a time of peace. When you're a Christian, there has to be a time that everything is all right, that you know if something happens. Do you have that peace today? Because it says in him you might have peace. But listen, in the world you shall have tribulation. You wonder why we see this world going like it is. We see churches falling. We see pastors falling. We see deacons falling. We see churches allowing things to come in the pulpit and leadership in the church that God calls an abomination. We see all this thing, and that's exactly what that verse says, tribulation. Sin, because Satan is in control of that sin train. It says, you shall have tribulation. if you're going through life and you're not having tribulation or you're not having spiritual warfare, maybe back up. Look what's going on. Understand that you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. And that's what I want to continue to get at tonight, that in him shall have peace. And always remember that through Jesus Christ, he has overcome the world. The next verse that I have is Matthew 16:26. All right? And here's what the kind of the world seems like it's kind of geared towards, right? And look, I love what God has allowed me to have, okay? And I think if God has allowed you to have something, you should take care of it. All right? Matthew 16:24. Then said Jesus unto his disciples, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. And the next, for whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. For what is a man profit, if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? So let's think about this. If we look at this world, everybody is so bent on possessions and things of that nature. But this is what this is saying. What will you profit if you take your last breath and you have everything that this world says you need? What is it going to profit you? Have you exchanged all of that for your soul? What it's talking about is, where is your mind? The world wants to take your mind off of God and the things of God and the Bible and Scripture. And again, it's not wrong to have possessions, I don't believe. And I believe that you should take care of it. But are you trading your soul? I had a good friend of mine that was a millionaire. And then he owned a lumber yard. He had a wife, 2 kids, and he had everything the world said he needed. Everything. He got hooked on methamphetamines. He killed himself on Mother's Day of 2012. So as I look at that story, I think, man, in the world's eyes, he had everything, right? He had money and possessions, and he didn't have to want for anything. Well, what did he do? He traded his soul for that last hit of meth. Be careful today, because we need to make sure our soul is more important than that. Again, in Romans 12:2, and this is going to be talking about conforming to the world. Again, another scripture that goes along with this world's views. The world wants you to drop your morals and values and start conforming to everything that they say. And we have a lot of sensitivity classes in the fire department, which I've been lucky to be in several of them, because sometimes I have a hard time keeping my mouth shut. But what I'm saying is, the world wants you to conform to their world. Again, the world is our enemy. Satan is our enemy driving this train. The world is our enemy, and they want you to change the way you think. I had a talk with a guy the other day and talking about how stupid the Immaculate Conception was, and just went on and on. And I had to take a deep breath, and I did my best to keep my composure, and I did it pretty good. But maybe I failed a couple things. But anyway, they want you to think the way they think. They want you to conform to the world. They want you to trade your soul for the next hit, or the next drink, or the next lie, or whatever it is. They want you to do that. It says here, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present yourself, your bodies, a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And if you start thinking about, in the Old Testament, the sacrifices, it had to be a sacrifice without spot or blemish, right? It had to be kept up for a certain amount of time, but the sacrifices had to be without spot or blemish. Now, I'm not sitting here telling you that you're going to be perfect. That's not what I'm telling you. But we need to try. We need to understand that the sacrifice that it had back in the Old Testament, that lamb with spot or blemish, we need to think on those things. We need to do our best to keep our minds wrapped around that, because we are the example for Christ in this world. And you're either a good example or you're a bad example. And a lot of times, not saying anything is a bad example, all right? I don't know why I threw that in there. And be not conformed into this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your minds, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Being conformed is changing from one thing to another. Maybe you stood on values about something, about sin, and now you've completely changed your views. Now, it's one thing if you're wrong, and you've interpreted scriptures wrong, but it's another thing if you just change to conform to this world. And we see a lot of churches today that are conforming to this world. We see a lot of pastors and deacons, and I don't know why I'm hammering on you guys. I love you guys, pastors and deacons, just so you know, all right? I just got to, but church members, how's that? There's a lot of church members changing their mind and changing and conforming to the world, because sometimes it's just easier to go along with the flow. I know there's sometimes in my life, being in a house with 6 women, it was easier for me sometimes just to ignore something or just go along with it, whether I agreed with it or not, because I didn't want to get chewed out by 6 different women. It was just, that was just how I had to do things. And my wife is probably, kids are going to laugh because I didn't keep my mouth shut very often, but sometimes I did. But what I'm saying is, sometimes people think it's easier just to go along with the world. And that's how we've gotten to where we're at today. Because we went along with the world, and we've changed this, and we've changed that, and we've changed the incorruptible God into a corruptible God, and we've changed that thing, and I don't say that as God is corruptible. You got to understand, I tried to quote that scripture and I forgot it, but what I'm saying is we cannot continue to conform to this world. We can't continue to change just because maybe it just doesn't fit our lifestyle. Maybe something's different in our life now. I mean, if you've got godly morals and values, stick to your godly morals and values. Let's go to 1 John chapter 2. And here it is. And this kind of pretty much, if you've got somebody, there's a lot of people that love this world. And again, I love my wife. I love my kids. I love my home. I love my job. And I hope you don't take that wrong. I'm thankful that God has given me all of that, and I want to take care of that. But there's nothing there that I would change for my soul. And that's what I want to get at. But here it says, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Is that all I have? Oh, there we go. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world pass away, and the lust thereof, but he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. So as we talk about lust, it's not always just a sexual lust. It's the things that we desire other than the things of God, whatever that is. For me, it could be hunting. For you, it may be something else. But listen, the lust of the flesh and the pride of life. Do you love the world more than you love your soul? I mean, if you do, there's a problem. Because this world is your enemy. And the things in this world is your enemy. And if you continue to follow the world, and if you continue to follow the things of the world, you may end up somewhere where you never planned on being. And I'm not just talking about hell. I'm talking about in this life. Sin will take you farther than you ever thought you would go and keep you longer than you ever thought you would stay. And young people, the few that we have, listen, if I can tell you one thing, is you better figure out what is sin and what is not sin, because things are coming your way. And if you let the world tell you this is how it is, you're going to be in trouble. And the last thing, as I close, is the flesh. We talked a little bit about the flesh and the pride of life and stuff like that. And I went to the verse that the pastor talked about this morning, Matthew chapter 26. As I thought about that, man, I think that this is such a good verse. In Matthew 26, 40 and 41 says, "And he cometh to the disciples and findeth them asleep, and said unto them, Peter, what, could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray that you enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." You know, if we think about what's going on here in this situation, is Christ knows that he's getting ready to be crucified. He takes 3 people with him that he really thought would be ready to pray, right? And I'm going to kind of paraphrase this in my own words. And so he took them and he said, "Tarry here." It doesn't say that he told them to pray, but I'm sure that was his intent, and I'm sure that the disciples understood that's what they were supposed to do, right? So here Christ was getting ready to go pray. He was getting ready to go crucified. He took 3 people with him that he really thought was going to pray him up and sit there and pray with him for however long it was. And listen, I'm sure that those 3 people, it was Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee. I'm sure when he picked them, they really thought, man, we're somebody, right? Christ wants us to go with him and pray. As he got into the garden, they sat there. Christ departed and went back, and they fell asleep. And what does that verse say in verse 41? The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. You know, I've never entered into sin in my life where I woke up that morning and said, you know what? I'm going to sin this way, and this way, and this way, and this way today, right? I don't know if you've ever all done that. If you did, I need to tell you, you probably need to rearrange your thought process, But you know, I always start my day I try to start my day with prayer and Bible reading. And when I leave there, I always feel like I can grab a lion by the tail. My spirit is willing, but my flesh is weak. And so then I come into the fire station, you know, and you know, I think one of my main things is anger. I think you guys have maybe keeping my mouth shut, but I get that from my wife. But, you know, when I come in that fire station and somebody says something to me, and man, my spirit is willing. I want to keep my mouth shut. I really do. I want to, oh, God bless you. Did you have a bad day? You know, I want to be that pastor voice if I could. But, man, sometimes that you just need to shut up, mind your own business comes out, and I don't know where that comes from. But what I'm saying is, as I'm praying by myself, my spirit is willing. I don't want to sin. Man, I fell into some of the same sin over and over again until I feel like I'm just like, and you guys have done it, where you're just less of a Christian, right? And the devil begins to beat you up over that sin. And I didn't wake up that morning saying, boy, I'm going to tell this guy to shut his mouth, or I'm going to tell this guy that he's an idiot, or whatever. I'm going to be good today. I'm going to have a smile on my face, and I'm going to be pleasant, and it happens for a while, and then my spirit is willing. My spirit is so willing inside me that I wish I could just not sin. I wish I could be that Christian, that perfect person, and I know we can't, but I wish that, I need to do what the Bible says, to crucify the flesh daily. Listen, I know you guys are the same way. If you're saying you're not, you're lying, all right? And you got another sin that you need to confess. But what I'm saying is, we don't wake up and say, I want to sin today, and this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to tell my wife she's mean and hateful or whatever it is, okay? I'm just saying the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. We've got to learn to do like it says in Galatians 5 and 16. Walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh, and these two are contrary one to the other. Today as Christians, we need to understand that Satan is our enemy, the world is our enemy, and the flesh is our enemy. Until we understand that we can put on all this armor we want, you know, we can look like we're ready for battle, but until we realize today who we're fighting against, until we realize that our spirit is willing, there's not a one person here that wants to dabble in sin. There's not one person when they took that first drink that said, I'm going to be an alcoholic. There's not one person that took that first hit of drugs and said, I want to be a drug addict. There's not one person that ever looked at that first look of something on the computer that says, I want to be an addict. There's not one person, I believe, Christians especially, that want to live in sin. And today as we stand, we have an invitation song today. Hopefully I've made sense. I've tried to keep my thoughts directed. But listen, our spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Today, it may be time for you to come up and pray for the flesh. Today, it may be time that you realized 50-50 just ain't going to cut it. And I'll just be quite honest with you. I love you all, but if you're happy with 50-50, I really don't want you guarding my back. I want somebody maybe that's up in the upper end of the 90 percentile, all right? Not the 50-50. But if we can think about this today, our spirit is willing. If your spirit is willing to serve God, that's the first step. The second step is we got to crucify the flesh. And as we think about that today, man, if you need prayer today, come up and pray, because our spirit is willing, but our flesh is weak. I'm going to shut up here and I'm going to go down and I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray for my flesh, because I know my flesh is the one thing that gets me in trouble. And I wish I could just put off this old self every day and say, like, tomorrow, that's it. I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to do that again. I really wish I could. I'm going to try it again, because my spirit is willing and my flesh is weak. So if you need prayer today as we close, come ahead and pray. In his presence daily. Just between